Independent testing has found that some of Australia's most popular cooking oils contain residues from industrial chemical solvents, pesticide-laden crops, and refining processes that generate toxic breakdown compounds the moment heat hits the pan. Pour the wrong oil into your frying pan, and what you are really cooking with is hexane residue, oxidized aldehydes, and persistent pesticide traces wrapped up in heart-healthy packaging. If one of these oils is sitting next to your stove right now, what I'm about to tell you changes whether you keep it or throw it out. In the next 15 minutes, I will expose 8 oils that failed safety scrutiny and reveal 5 that actually hold up when you look inside the bottle. Coming in at number 8, Praise Canola Oil. Praise built its name on one idea: heart-healthy, doctor-friendly, trusted by Australian families for decades. The yellow bottle, the clean label, the responsible-sounding promise. It looks like an obvious choice when you are standing in the cooking oil aisle trying to do right by your family. But here is what the production process looks like before that oil reaches your shelf. Mass-market canola is not cold-pressed. It is extracted using hexane, an industrial petroleum-derived solvent. Consumer group testing and food science research have identified residual hexane traces in commercially refined canola oils in this category. Hexane is a known neurotoxin used industrially to degrease engines. It is not a food-grade substance, and the refining process cannot guarantee its complete removal. The refining also strips away whatever natural antioxidants the canola plant contained, leaving a structurally fragile oil with nothing to protect it from heat damage. When that fragile oil hits a hot pan, a reaction begins. The polyunsaturated fatty acids oxidize rapidly, generating toxic aldehydes, specifically 4-hydroxynonenal and malondialdehyde, both studied extensively in connection with cellular damage and arterial inflammation. Open a bottle of Praise canola and smell it. That flat, neutral, almost chemical cleanliness is not purity. Real cold-pressed oils have a scent, a character, a connection to the plant they came from. This has been processed into blankness. Cook with it and watch the oil shimmer quickly, spread fast, react immediately to high heat. That rapid, nervous response is fragility, not quality. For people managing elevated cholesterol or anyone on daily cardiovascular medication, every meal cooked in an oxidizing oil is compounding the very problem that medication is trying to manage. Aldehyde exposure from overheated, unstable oils does not announce itself with symptoms. It accumulates, plate by plate, year by year, until the arterial inflammation it feeds becomes the cardiovascular event no one saw coming. Hexane residue in the production process, oxidized aldehydes on the stove, a heart-healthy label on a structurally compromised oil. A lot of people switch to a blended all-purpose oil, thinking they are getting something more balanced, more suitable for everyday cooking, more reliable than a single-seed product. They are not. At number 7, Peerless cooking oil. Peerless is the oil behind the oil. Most Australians have never bought it by name, but they have eaten food cooked in it across thousands of meals. It is the oil in commercial kitchens, catering operations, school canteens, and fish and chip shops across the country, and it is also sold into Australian homes as an affordable, all-purpose frying option. The pitch is simple: versatile, neutral, economical. What the label does not advertise is the composition or its long-term dietary consequence. Peerless is a blended oil built primarily from refined soybean and canola, 2 of the most omega-6 dominant oils in the food supply. In isolation, omega-6 fatty acids are not dangerous. In ratio to omega-3 fatty acids, over time, they become a serious problem. The ideal dietary omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is estimated between 4:1 and 1:1. Research suggests the average Australian consuming refined seed oils daily is sitting at ratios closer to 15:1 or even 20:1, and products like Peerless are a primary driver of that imbalance. When that imbalance becomes chronic, The body's inflammatory signaling tips. Arachidonic acid, derived from excess linoleic acid in these oils, drives pro-inflammatory pathways throughout the body. For people managing arthritis, type 2 diabetes, or hypertension, and for families using this as their primary daily cooking fat, that chronic inflammatory signal is not background noise. It actively worsens every inflammation-related condition it touches, quietly, every mealtime. Look at the Peerless bottle. No harvest date, no country of origin for the source crops, no fatty acid profile disclosed, just oil. That opacity is deliberate. Companies using quality ingredients tell you about them. Companies using commodity industrial inputs keep the label as minimal as regulations allow. The price reflects what went in. Chronic omega-6 overload with no transparency and no acknowledgement of the consequences. That was a budget commercial blend. But surely, the brands that have been in Australian supermarkets for generations, the ones with familiar packaging and decades of shelf presence, are a step above commodity oil. Think again. Number 6. Crisco vegetable oil. Crisco is one of the oldest cooking fat brands in the world, and Australians have seen it in supermarkets for decades, particularly popular for baking, pastry work, and deep frying. That familiarity is the product. Crisco sells a sense of reliability so deeply embedded that most people never question it. The oil itself is refined from a blend of soybean and palm oils. The refining is not gentle. Industrial vegetable oil refining involves degumming, bleaching, and deodorization, each stage at elevated temperatures that further degrade the oil's structural integrity. Natural antioxidants, like tocopherols, which would otherwise provide partial protection against oxidation during cooking, are stripped out during processing. What remains is a refined fat with a depleted fatty acid profile and, according to food scientists studying industrial oil contaminants, trace residues from the bleaching agents used in the deodorization stage. The palm fraction in the Crisco blend brings a specific cardiovascular concern. Refined palm oil is extremely high in palmitic acid, a saturated fatty acid that research has linked to endothelial dysfunction, the process by which artery walls lose flexibility and become less responsive to blood flow regulation. For anyone with elevated LDL cholesterol, research including a 2020 University of California study found that soybean oil altered the expression of genes related to cholesterol metabolism and neurological function, disrupting the biological systems designed to manage lipid balance. Pour Crisco into a hot pan and pay attention to what happens as the temperature climbs, that sharp, acrid edge that builds in the air, the faint bitterness in food cooked in this oil. That is chemical breakdown happening in real time in your kitchen. Industrial fat dressed up in decades of brand recognition with no natural protection left inside the bottle. Check your pantry right now, because the next brand is in almost every Australian household, and what consumer testing found inside the label will change how you read any vegetable oil. Number 5. Sunbeam vegetable oil. Sunbeam sits on the bottom shelf of every Coles and Woolworths in the country. Budget price, clean-looking bottle, neutral label. It is the oil people reach for when they are not thinking about oil, when cost is the deciding factor, and the brand is just something they have always bought. Choice. Australia has highlighted that generic vegetable oil products like Sunbeam rarely disclose the actual seed blend used in the product. The label says vegetable oil. That satisfies Australian food labelling law. It tells the consumer nothing about what they are cooking with. Third-party analysis of comparable products consistently identifies high concentrations of refined linoleic acid, the omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid most vulnerable to heat degradation. At standard Australian home frying temperatures between 180 and 220 degrees Celsius, linoleic acid breaks down rapidly and generates reactive compounds, including acrolein, 4-hydroxynonenal, and other toxic aldehydes. These are not hypothetical risks sitting in a research paper. They are measurable compounds present in your kitchen air and embedded in the food on your plate every time you cook at high heat with this oil. For people with compromised kidney function and for families cooking daily high heat meals over years, those metabolic byproducts must be processed and cleared. Research in clinical nephrology has explored the connection between chronic dietary aldehyde exposure and renal tubular stress. The kidneys compensate silently under load until the damage becomes clinically visible, under $3 for a litre. That price reflects the input costs. Those input costs reflect exactly what went into the bottle and exactly what was left out. The label says vegetable. The breakdown chemistry in your pan tells a different story. That was an opaque product with a hidden composition. Now here is something worse. A brand that spent years and marketing budget specifically positioning itself as the health-conscious upgrade. Number 4. Alpha 1 Rice Bran Oil. Alpha 1 built a precise marketing position in the Australian health food space, not just cooking oil, a cholesterol-lowering, heart-healthy, high-heat stable oil recommended by cardiologists and suitable for diabetics. The claims are specific and they are targeted at the exact Australians who are already paying attention to what they put in their bodies. People actively managing cardiovascular risk. The product carries a significant health premium over standard supermarket oils. Here is what the research actually shows. Rice bran oil does contain gamma-oryzanol, a plant sterol compound with some demonstrated antioxidant activity. However, a review published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition found the cholesterol-lowering effects of rice bran oil in human trials to be modest and inconsistent, well below the clinical significance implied by the marketing. More critically, Alpha 1's product is not cold-pressed. It is solvent extracted and industrially refined. The gamma-oryzanol content, the very compound used to justify the health premium price, is partially degraded during the refining process you cannot see on the label. You are paying a premium for diminished functional ingredients. There is a second concern specific to Australians over 50 managing cholesterol with statins and anyone whose GP has prescribed plant sterol supplements. Rice bran oil contains natural plant sterols. At supervised, therapeutic doses, sterols can help reduce cholesterol absorption. But uncontrolled sterol intake from a cooking oil used for every daily meal can interfere with how statins are absorbed and processed. Lipid specialists document this interaction. No one prints it on the Alpha 1 label. The health promise on the bottle. The refined and diminished reality inside. The drug interaction nobody told you about. If a brand wearing a health halo can mislead you, surely the no-frills staples your parents trusted for affordability are at least straightforwardly honest. They were not watching their cholesterol. They were just buying what cost the least. And the affordable choice hid something with a far longer reach. Number 3. Allowrie blended vegetable oil. Allowrie is not glamorous. It does not pretend to be healthy. It is marketed as cheap, reliable, and available everywhere. A blended vegetable oil stocked in Woolworths and Coles since before most of its current customers were born. The Huai blend contains refined cottonseed and soybean oils. Cottonseed oil is one of the most pesticide-intensive crops grown anywhere in the world. Cotton is an industrial fiber crop, not a food crop. The pesticide regimes applied to cotton farming are among the most aggressive in global agriculture because cotton is not subject to the food crop restrictions that apply to edible seed oils like canola or sunflower. The residue burden on cottonseed is therefore substantially higher than on purpose-grown food crops. Industrial refining reduces but does not fully eliminate these residues. Organochlorine pesticide compounds, which include persistent organic pollutants, have been detected in cottonseed oil samples in international food safety monitoring programs. These compounds are fat-soluble. They are not excreted rapidly. They accumulate in human adipose tissue, building up over years of dietary exposure through every tablespoon of blended oil that contains cottonseed. Epidemiological. Research published in peer-reviewed journals, including studies in the American Journal of Epidemiology, has found associations between persistent organic pollutant exposure through dietary fat sources and elevated risk of type 2 diabetes onset, as well as disruption of thyroid hormone signaling. For anyone over 50 whose thyroid is already being monitored, and for families using Allowrie as their primary cooking fat year after year, this is decades of cumulative dietary exposure to compounds from an industry that was never designed to meet food crop safety standards. $3 a bottle. Pesticide-laden crop. Refining that cannot clean it completely. All of it disguised as a simple cooking oil. 3 brands down, 3 of the most trusted names left to go. The next one borrowed an entirely different kind of brand trust to hide what was really inside. Number 2, Nuttelex Cooking Oil Blend. Nuttelex earned its place in Australian kitchens as the dairy-free alternative, the spread for lactose-intolerant families, the plant-based option at a time when plant-based meant something specific about care and consideration rather than a marketing category. When Nuttelex extended that trusted name to a cooking oil blend, consumers carried all of that goodwill straight across to the new product without examining the label. The blend is built on refined palm and canola fractions. The palm fraction is the critical problem. Refined palm oil is exceptionally high in palmitic acid, a 16-carbon saturated fatty acid. Unlike stearic acid, which the liver metabolizes relatively neutrally, palmitic acid has been identified in cardiovascular research as directly damaging to endothelial cells. The mechanism is documented. Palmitic acid promotes inflammatory cytokine expression in arterial walls and impairs the endothelium's capacity to regulate vascular tone and blood pressure response. For Australians on antihypertensive medication, and for anyone managing established cardiovascular disease, palmitic acid from a daily cooking oil is a compound actively working against the biology that medication is trying to support. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has previously raised palm oil labelling concerns in the broader consumer goods sector, addressing questions about how palm-derived ingredients are described and whether consumers can identify them clearly on product labels. The Nuttelex oil blend does not make its palmitic acid content immediately legible for consumers making cardiovascular dietary choices. You chose Nuttelex because the dairy-free positioning felt like the considered, responsible option. The plant-based halo covered the palm oil problem. Palmitic acid undermining your arteries. A trusted brand name that borrowed goodwill it did not earn for this product. This is where it gets personal. The number 1 spot goes to a brand built specifically on nostalgia and traditional values, targeting the exact Australians most likely to be managing the condition its hidden ambiguity most directly threatens. Number 1, Luv-a-Duck Frying Oil, Duck Fat Blend. Luv-a-Duck built its reputation as Australia's premium duck producer. Traditional, honest, genuinely Australian, the kind of food brand that feels like it has nothing to hide. When they released a duck fat frying blend, the positioning was calculated and effective. Nostalgic, natural, a return to the way your grandmother cooked before vegetable oils took over every kitchen. The emerging research challenging refined seed oils gave this product additional tailwind, and older Australians especially responded. But what the Luv-a-Duck frying blend actually delivers is not what the traditional fat story implies. The product blends rendered duck fat with refined vegetable oil fillers. The labeling has been criticized for failing to clearly disclose the ratio of duck fat to vegetable oil, meaning consumers cannot determine what fraction of the product is the traditional animal fat they paid for and what fraction is the industrial seed oil they thought they were avoiding. When you cannot determine the actual composition of your primary cooking fat, you cannot manage your saturated fat intake. That is not a minor consumer information issue. For Australians managing cholesterol through diet, and for anyone whose GP is monitoring lipid levels, the inability to calculate daily saturated fat from an ambiguously labeled product makes dietary management genuinely impossible. The most serious concern is for the large portion of older Australians on anticoagulant therapy, particularly warfarin. Warfarin's therapeutic efficacy is directly dependent on consistent dietary fat intake and stable vitamin K levels. A cooking fat with an undisclosed composition ratio makes it clinically impossible for patients and their prescribing doctors to maintain the dietary consistency that safe anticoagulant management requires. INR can shift outside the therapeutic range. Clotting risk changes, all because a label chose heritage marketing over the transparency that its customers' health requires. The nostalgic story on the outside, ambiguous chemistry on the inside, a label that told you everything except what you needed to know. If this helps you stay safer at the store, hit subscribe. It is free, and it means you will never miss these exposures. But do not give up on cooking with fat. These 5 options have been tested, certified, and verified to actually deliver what the oils above only claimed. Cobram Estate Extra Virgin Olive Oil. Cobram Estate does something almost no mass-market oil producer in Australia does. They cold press Australian-grown olives within hours of harvest. Not days, hours. That timing is the entire story. Olive polyphenols, particularly oleocanthal and oleuropein, degrade rapidly after the fruit is picked. Most imported extra virgin olive oils arrive in Australian supermarkets after weeks or months in transit, with polyphenol levels significantly reduced from whatever they were at origin, regardless of what the label claims. Cobram invests in on-site pressing infrastructure across their Victorian and South Australian growing regions specifically to capture those compounds at peak concentration before degradation begins. The proof is independently verifiable. Cobram holds NAOOA certification from the North American Olive Oil Association and regularly publishes third-party laboratory results confirming that their oil meets strict extra virgin chemical standards, including free fatty acid content below 0.5% and peroxide values within the freshness threshold. These are not marketing claims. They are externally audited numbers anyone can look up. Open a bottle of Cobram, and the difference is sensory and immediate. A grassy, peppery aroma. A catch in the back of the throat when you taste it cold. That peppery sensation is oleocanthal, the same compound that gives ibuprofen its characteristic throat tickle, identified by researchers at the Manel Chemical Senses Center as having comparable anti-inflammatory mechanism to over-the-counter pain relief. For people managing chronic joint inflammation or anyone focused on cardiovascular health through their daily cooking choices, that anti-inflammatory mechanism is active every time you cook with fresh, high polyphenol olive oil. Cobram is stocked in Coles, Woolworths, and IGA nationally. It costs more than the refined oils we covered. It costs less than the inflammation they promote. Australian olives, Australian pressing, third-party verification, and a measurable health benefit in every bottle. Melrose Organic Extra Virgin Coconut Oil. Melrose takes a fundamentally different approach from every oil on the bad list. They start with certified organic coconuts, use cold press mechanical extraction only, and add absolutely nothing. No hexane, no bleaching stage, no deodorization. The result is an oil that retains its full, medium-chain triglyceride profile, the fatty acid composition that makes coconut oil biochemically distinct from long-chain saturated fats. MCTs, specifically caprylic and capric acid, are metabolized along a different pathway from palmitic acid. They travel directly to the liver for rapid energy conversion rather than being assembled into lipoproteins and circulating through the bloodstream in the way that long-chain saturated fats do. This is the mechanism that separates coconut oil from the palm oil fraction we identified in Nuttelex. Melrose holds Australian Certified Organic Accreditation issued by ACO, one of the most rigorous certification bodies operating in Australia. ACO accreditation requires documented supply chain traceability from farm to shelf, annual farm audits by independent inspectors, and ongoing product testing. It is a verified standard, not a self-declared label that any brand can print without accountability. Open a jar of Melrose and smell it. Clean, faintly, tropical, nothing sharp or chemical, nothing that suggests industrial processing. Scoop a small amount and watch it transition from solid to liquid between your fingers at room temperature. That phase behavior is completely natural. It is what unrefined coconut fat does. Highly processed oils have been homogenized beyond any natural thermal response. For people exploring emerging research on MCT supplementation as a fuel source for brain tissue under metabolic stress, and for anyone looking to replace refined seed oils with a certified organic, cold-pressed alternative, Melrose is available nationally through health food retailers and increasingly through mainstream supermarkets. Certified organic, cold-pressed, genuinely traceable, and meaningfully different from everything on the bad list. Squeaky Gate Extra Virgin Olive Oil. Squeaky Gate does something rare in the supermarket olive oil category. They print the actual harvest date on every bottle, not a best before date, extrapolated from an unknown pressing date. The harvest date. That single piece of information is the most important quality signal in olive oil because freshness determines polyphenol concentration, and polyphenol concentration determines whether you are getting a fat with measurable anti-inflammatory benefit or an expensive bottle of slowly oxidized liquid. Most supermarket olive oils, including many carrying extra virgin labels, are 12 to 24 months old before a consumer opens them. By that point, polyphenol degradation is significant, regardless of how good the oil was at origin. Squeaky Gate's harvest date labeling creates accountability at every stage of their supply chain because the consumer can calculate the oil's age themselves. The brand has undergone independent polyphenol testing, and those results have been referenced in Australian food media and by independent oil quality advocates. They source Australian olives and comply fully with all Australian food standard labelling. Requirements including country of origin. You can pick up Squeaky Gate at Coles nationally. For anyone focused on endothelial health, including people monitoring blood pressure, cholesterol levels, or early arterial stiffness. The clinical evidence for verified fresh extra virgin olive oil is strong. The pre-dime trial, one of the largest dietary intervention studies ever conducted, demonstrated significant reductions in cardiovascular events among participants using polyphenol-rich olive oil as their primary cooking fat compared to low-fat dietary control groups. Squeaky Gate delivers that clinical mechanism in a bottle clearly dated so you know exactly what you are buying. Harvest date on the label, Australian olives, verified freshness, and a direct connection to the evidence base. Macro-organic, cold-pressed, extra virgin olive oil. Not everyone can or wants to spend $8 or $9 on a bottle of cooking oil every week. Woolworth's own macro-organic range makes the argument that you do not have to. This product carries Australian Certified Organic accreditation through ACO, meaning it has been independently audited for pesticide-free sourcing and verified clean production methods. Cold-pressed processing is stated on the label and is consistent with the product's organic certification requirements, which prohibit the solvent extraction methods used in the refined oils covered earlier. At its price point, this is one of the most accessible certified organic cooking oils available in mainstream Australian retail. For people managing type 2 diabetes through dietary choices, the clinical evidence base for extra virgin olive oil is among the strongest of any dietary fat studied. The pre-dimed trial demonstrated that participants using extra virgin olive oil as their primary cooking fat experienced improved insulin sensitivity and reduced HbA1c markers compared to low-fat dietary control groups. That is a real-world dietary fat trial conducted over years using an oil you can buy at Woolworths at a competitive price. Open the macro-organic bottle and you find a genuine olive aroma, not the flat chemical neutrality of a refined oil. Pour it cold over salad or use it for low to medium heat cooking. The flavor is mild but present, which is exactly the point. Real olive oil has character because it has a composition. Processed oils have been designed to have neither. A CO certification, cold-pressed processing, clinical evidence behind the fat category, and a price point that makes it genuinely accessible. No reason left to reach for the refined blends on the bottom shelf. Plenty Foods Macadamia Oil. Macadamia oil is one of the most underused and least discussed cooking oils available in Australia, which is remarkable given that Australia produces the majority of the world's macadamia crop. This is a genuinely local product with a fatty acid profile that outperforms every other oil on this list for high heat cooking. Plenty Foods cold presses certified organic Australian macadamias and produces an oil that is naturally around 80% oleic acid, the same monounsaturated omega-9 fatty acid that makes extra virgin olive oil cardiovascularly protective. Oleic acid is the most heat-stable of all unsaturated fatty acids. It does not oxidize at standard cooking temperatures and does not generate the aldehydes that make refined canola, Sunbeam vegetable oil, and Peerless blend dangerous when heat is applied. This means you can cook at higher temperatures with macadamia oil without the breakdown chemistry that compromises both the food and your health. Plenty Foods holds NASAA organic certification from the National Association for Sustainable Agriculture Australia, and the company publishes independent fatty acid profiles showing oleic acid content verified above 80% through accredited food laboratory testing. These are not claimed numbers, they are audited. Open a bottle and smell it. Subtle, clean, a faint nuttiness, with nothing chemical or industrial behind it. Heat it in a pan and it holds. No smoke at standard frying temperatures, no shimmering nervous breakdown as heat builds, no acrid edge. For people managing arthritis, cardiovascular disease, or insulin resistance, and for anyone who has been cooking daily with the refined seed oils we exposed on this list, switching to macadamia oil removes the omega-6 overload and the aldehyde risk without introducing the saturated fat concerns associated with palm oil. Australian-grown, cold-pressed, independently certified, and the most heat-stable clean cooking option available. 8 oils exposed, 5 safe picks proven. Go check your pantry right now. If you see any brand from this list, throw it out. Your next meal deserves better. Subscribe now, and if you are watching on TV, tap your remote so you never get blindsided again.